If you have tuned into this podcast for any period of time, you know that we talk quite a bit about retirement planning, investment planning, tax strategies, all the things that you need to do to create a financially secure retirement. I hope if you've also been tuning in for some period of time, you've noticed some undercurrent of additional talk. And that talk is about not just how do you create a financially secure retirement, but how do you create a meaningful retirement, a purposeful retirement, a retirement that you're going to look back on with great joy as you live through it. And I am thrilled today to have as a guest on the Ready for Retirement podcast, Dr. Riley Moynes. Dr. Riley Moynes is a successful author, speaker, educator. He's founded a wealth management firm. He's delivered a TED Talk that has now over 4.3 million views. Dr. Riley Moynes, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, James.
You're very welcome. And the pleasure is mine. And I am always fascinated by this because you yourself have founded a wealth management firm, which I know means you have helped a lot of people with the financial aspect of retirement. When did you personally, Riley, determine, or not determine, but start to see there's more to this than just the financial side of the planning work?
Yeah, unfortunately, later than I would have liked as I look back. I came kind of smack up against it during my retirement. I lived through phase one, which we'll talk a little bit about, but it's kind of the vacation phase and lasts for a year or so. And it was exactly what I had expected. It was what everybody had told me was the ideal retirement. And what happened to me and what has happened to hundreds of others, thousands of others, I'm sure, is that at the end of that time, I got bored. Too much of a good thing was actually too much. You could only play so much golf or do so much, whatever it is that you had planned to do when you retired. And I found that I was kind of disillusioned, and I moved into phase two. And phase two is a bad time for many, many retirees. It certainly was for me. I didn't know what it was at that time. It was only after I did all the work that I've done that I was able to kind of frame it in a way that has been helpful to me and helpful to others. But I wish I knew then, when I was still advising, what I know now about it. I would have been a much better advisor. I would have been a more well-rounded advisor, and I probably could have made a greater positive impact on the lives of many of my clients.
So when you gave that TED Talk, which we're going to reference to in the show notes, and I encourage everyone listening to tune into that, and I'll ask Riley if you don't mind summarizing in just a bit here, but it wasn't a TED Talk based upon what was theoretical or you'd read about or seen other people go through. No. It was what you personally lived through, and that's what led to understanding what are those four distinct phases of retirement.
Well, yes, it was what I experienced, but more importantly, it is what many hundreds and thousands of other retirees have reported as well. And part of the work that I did was to try to figure out what this was all about. And so, as I went to the literature, I discovered, as you know very well, that most of the literature surrounding retirement planning relates to investments and tax planning and retirement planning, estate planning, wills, powers of attorney, all that kind of stuff, critically important stuff, but just not what I was looking for. So I interviewed well over 150 people who had been referred to me, people that I had been told had figured out retirement, whatever that means. And I asked them a series of questions. I always finished up by asking them, how do you squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And after about 3 years of that effort, I was faced with a mountain of data that I had to try to make sense of. And what finally emerged, I think, for me, and I've tested it since that time over and over and over again, and it has proven to be strong. It's a helpful framework, and that's how the four phases of retirement evolved.
I think it's an incredibly helpful framework. And in fact, a client of mine, I was having a review meeting with him. Shout out to Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. He said, "Hey, have you heard of Riley Moynes, Dr. Riley Moynes?" I said, "No, but let me tune in and let me listen to that TED Talk." And I did. And I said, yeah, this is someone that didn't just read about something and is regurgitating information. This is someone that clearly has a lived experience. Seems like there's some degree of personal transformation within it. If you don't mind, Riley, do you mind sharing a summary? I'll link to the full TED Talk, but a summary of what are those four phases that people tend to go through when they
Yeah.
retire?
Well, first of all, I should say, James, that the TED Talk, it's like 12 minutes long, and it was based on my book, The Four Phases of Retirement, which is probably the fuller discussion of the four phases, and it's available through our website, which I know you're going to reference, and I appreciate that. Thank
Yes.
you. But essentially, the four phases are well, the first phase, as I've alluded to, lasts for about a year or so. It lasted just about 2 years for me. And it's what I call the vacation phase. It's just like a vacation. You do what you want. You get up in the morning when you want. You go to bed when you want. And you just kind of do what you want as you do when you're on a vacation. And that's what most people believe to be the ideal form of retirement. It's what all the advertising says it should be like, cavorting along the beach, of course, with a loved one and having a glass of wine and all of those things. And they're all part of it. But as I say, sometimes, in fact, always, I think too much of a good thing is too much. And after, for me, it was about 2 years, I was kind of bored stiff. I was asking myself, is that all there is to retirement? That's what I was told it was supposed to be. It's been great, but I'm bored. And then I was moving into phase two. And phase two is the toughest phase. I certainly have found it. Many people have confirmed it as well. Phase two is when I call it when we feel loss and we feel lost. And there are kind of five significant losses that almost always accompany phase two. There's the loss of structure. Most of us, I think, when we're in the vacation phase, like the fact that there's no structure. We always do when we're on vacation, but I'm convinced that deep down inside, there's something genetically wired in us that requires a structure. And we lose that in phase two. We lose our identity in phase two, males in particular, but not exclusively. We identify with the work that we do. We try our best to make it meaningful. And when that work is finished, we lose some of our identity as well. Thirdly, we lose some of the relationships that we have built up over the years, whether they be in our domestic career or working outside the home. Some of these folks become good personal friends. And when we retire, when we leave, some of those relationships suffer as well. We lose a sense of purpose because many of us get real purpose from our work. And when we take it seriously, and when that's gone, that sense of purpose is lost and part of us is lost. And number five, some of us lose a sense of power. Some of us have over the years assumed perhaps some responsibility for some budgeting or for personnel. And yet when we walk away the last time, we're just a guy or a gal in the street. And we don't see those losses coming. They're all directly related to retirement. We lose them all at the same time. It's like, bang, it's traumatic for many, many folks. And it hits us really hard. And it gets worse in phase two because we then have to deal with 3 Ds. We have to deal with decline, both physical and mental. We have to deal with depression. The world famous Mayo Clinic suggests that there is a 40% likelihood that when we retire, we will exhibit signs of clinical depression. And thirdly, many folks have to deal with divorce. For those folks over 50, the rate of divorce has doubled. And for those over 65, the rate has tripled since 1990. Unbelievable statistics that are not directly related to retirement, but related more to a time of life, which happens in many cases to overlap with retirement. And people need to get through phase two because otherwise they can become statistics. Do you know the highest rate of suicide in North America today? Men over 75. It's shocking. And phase two is a very, very difficult time for many, many people. Phase three. Sooner or later, most of us say to ourselves or a significant other, hey, I cannot go on like this. I don't want to spend the rest of my life, quite likely for many baby boomers, 30 years in retirement, a third of our lives. I can't go on like this. And we try something. We have to try something. It's called phase three is called trial and error. And that's when we have to ask ourselves, what is it that's going to make me want to get up in the morning again? What is it that I can do that's going to give me a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment? And that's phase three. And people need to work through phase three. They need to try things that they can do that are going to make them want to get up in the morning again. My belief is that only about 60 to 65% of retirees are able to get through phases 2 and 3 and get to phase 4. And that's the phase where we reinvent and we rewire. And that is the most satisfying, the most gratifying phase of all. I've seen it over and over again. Phase 4 people can't wait to get up in the morning. They've got a whole list of things that they want to be involved with. They've got connections that they are involved in all kinds of activities. Lots of volunteering is involved in phase 4. In fact, what distinguishes phase 4 people from other phases is a commitment to providing service to others. That's the key in phase 4. Maybe it's on a volunteer basis, maybe it's on a part-time basis, maybe you're working part-time, but it's service to others that is the critical aspect of phase 4. In a nutshell, that's them.
That's them. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. I want to touch on two things real quick, Riley, is the first, there's almost a hero's journey arc to this of you retire and it's great and there's the vacation, but then you're met with struggle and it takes something to wake you up to that. And then almost the fight to get through that, to break through to phase 4. Mm-hmm. So I want people to understand two things. One is almost, hey, what's the risk of not doing this? I think so often you hear this so much that people spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their retirement. And if you go through it or if you go into it unprepared, there likely will be depression. There will likely be some degree of unsatisfaction. That's the risk. That's the reality, but there is also hope. There is the hope that, look, if you're willing to go through this, if you're willing to put in the time and try things, there's incredible satisfaction and purpose on the other end. Yeah. In your experience, why do you find that it's only, I think you said 65% of people that make it to phase 4?
Yeah. I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to be held to that percentage because it's not a longitudinal research study by any means. It's my take on all of the interviews that I've done. But why don't people break through? I believe that people don't break through because they're not prepared to work hard enough. To me, it's critically important that in order to break through, you need to ask yourself some tough questions. You need to ask yourself, for example, hey, why am I here? What's the purpose of my being here? And we are not very good at being introspective, I have found. I find that in my workshops, we try to force people to be a little bit more introspective. And I ask them and I encourage them, prod them if necessary, to answer some questions. Number one, what is it that they love to do and that they do very well? Everyone has those things. Everyone is able to do some things extremely well and they love doing them. But I find it over and over again in our workshops that people haven't thought about that. They haven't thought about that for years, and they need to, because those are going to be important tools for moving forward. So we need to know, I call it unique ability. It's not unique in the sense that no one else on earth has those abilities, but it's representative of things that you love to do and that you do really well. The second thing that I encourage people, prod people to look at is list just 5 victories, successes, big wins that you've experienced so far in your life. People could clearly do way more than that if they chose to, but I encourage people to do just 5. because we don't think about those things. We don't think about our victories, generally speaking. Third thing I ask them to do is to look for connections. And it astounds me over and over again, James, that people do not see the connection. But clearly there is one between the things that they love to do and do really well and past successes. Of course they're connected, but people don't see that often. And I encourage them to physically make those connections. And the fourth thing that we ask people to do then is taking all of those things into account. Ask themselves, what is it that what kind of psychic, if not financial, payback are they going to get from whatever it is that they commit to? And for most people, it makes them feel good when they identify these things and they apply them, quite likely in an entirely new part of their lives. But that kind of connection, that's what I call their sweet spot. And that's where they want to spend as much time as possible in phase 4, because it's what provides the kind of meaning and significance that we all look for.
Yeah. Now, the follow-up question to that, and that makes a lot of sense, is, and I can hear a lot of people thinking this, is how do I skip phase 2 and 3? If there's a formula for this, can I go right from phase 1 to phase 4?
Yeah. And in fact, I've discovered that the answer is a tentative yes. There are, I believe it's about 10 to maybe 12% of retirees, and they generally tend to be in two groups. The first group are entrepreneurs, people who run their own businesses, often small businesses. The size doesn't really matter, but they're entrepreneurial. They have committed, generally speaking, to what they have been doing in many cases for years. It's where they get the greatest satisfaction on earth, and they probably should keep on doing it, although perhaps at a less hectic pace. So people who are committed to their entrepreneurial role, they know they love what they're doing, and kind of why would they change except perhaps less intensity. The second group that I found who are able to avoid phases 2 and 3 tend to be people who, during their working or domestic careers, have identified a calling, a hobby, something that engrosses them, something that they love to do. Maybe it's coaching, maybe it's art, maybe it's photography. It doesn't really matter what it is, but something that they have been doing for a number of years. And what they love to do, of course, is to do more of that in retirement. So they know exactly what's going to give them great satisfaction and a great sense of meaning. And so they tend to expand upon that. Those are the two groups that I have found who are able often to avoid phases 2 and 3.
And even as you speak, and as I was listening to your TED Talk and our prior conversation, there's almost the sense of it's not necessarily what we're talking about isn't unique to retirement. It's unique to the human condition to an extent that we're all trying to figure out, who are we? What is our purpose? Why are we here? The difference is, for the first maybe 30, 40 years of our life, we have this thing called work to distract us from that difficult question. Yeah. When all of a sudden that work is taken away because either we retire or whatever happens, we have nothing left to distract. And we're faced head on with, who am I actually and what do I want to do? That being said, is there something people can begin doing even before they retire to prepare for this transition, to make it the best retirement possible?
Yeah. Most people do not get to phase 4, I believe, because of a lack of effort. They just don't realize that they have to identify these things. They have to answer the questions that you've just asked, and they've never been forced to do so before. So I believe that one way that people can do that is to take stock from a much earlier stage of their lives. What are the things that they love to do? What are the things that they do really, really well? What are the things that have led to success in the past? And I believe that those are the sorts of things that are going to lead to a successful retirement in the future, not necessarily applied in the same field that they were before, whether it be medicine or law or accounting or education. Maybe not that at all, but they've got these strengths. They've got these things that have led to success. They do things that make them feel good, and they can apply them in an entirely different field, a different area. And it just makes all the difference for people to know what their strengths are, to know what they love to do, what has led to success in the past, and to apply them in a new situation.
Yeah. One, as you're talking, and this thought just popped in my mind, nothing I prepared ahead of time, but I was listening, I believe it was to a podcast between Tim Ferriss and Greg McKeown, who wrote the book Essentialism. And I think that's where it was. And there was part of the conversation was Maslow has the hierarchy of needs. Okay, at first you need your basic things like security and food and shelter and love and belonging. Then all the way at the top, he said, hey, you need self-actualization. And then, and I want to be careful of saying this because I have not verified this, but the conversation, he said, hey, Maslow actually added on to that before he passed and said, it's not self-actualization that's at the top. It's this sense of self-transcendence. And there's a key distinction there of when we go into retirement and it's how much golf can I play and how much travel can I do? And there's a sense of how can I gratify me at some point that becomes empty and becomes something you say there's more to life than this. But that sense of self-transcendence of, I think this is why you see people finding that purpose in coaching, in teaching, in volunteering, and doing something that is bigger than a really nice trip to Hawaii or a great game of golf.
Yeah, it's bigger than themselves. I think that's the kind of the operative phrase. We want to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves. And many of us achieve that during our work or during our domestic career. And when it comes to retirement, we need to find that again. We need to refocus. We need to reinvent and rewire.
Yeah.
That's part of phase four.
So people who are listening saying, okay, that makes sense. I get what it's going to look like. And I think some people put off retirement for fear of going right into phase two. They already know, hey, I feel like that loss is going to happen right away. When people look at phase three, I think sometimes there's a loss of, hey, can I have some ideas? Like how do I experiment? Should I go down to the food shelter? Should I do something with the local community college? Are there common tasks or activities or quote unquote, these little experiments that you've seen people take? You say more often than not, if people experiment with these activities, they find that sense of purpose sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And I'll repeat because it's the same. It is, what is it that you love to do and that you do really well? What is it that has led to success in your life in the past before? And what is it that makes you feel really good when you do it? That combination, I think, is equally applicable kind of at any time in our lives, but in particular in retirement when we are looking to reinvent and rewire.
And do you find that with those, obviously they're unique to each person, the unique ability, which as you said is not unique, but there is something specific to you that's maybe hardwired into your DNA.
Yep.
Do you find, hey, generally speaking, these activities that work fall under the category of teaching, of volunteering, of a specific hobby, or is it a whole bunch of different things it could look like?
It's service to others. Whatever activity that you are involved with that provides service to others. So maybe it's teaching, maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's mentoring, maybe it's I one of the people that I interviewed gets great satisfaction, believe it or not. He gets great satisfaction out of delivering prescriptions 2 or 3 times a week for a couple of hours each day. And he delivers prescriptions to people who otherwise could not get to the pharmacy. And it gives him great satisfaction to deliver that. He makes a little bit of beer money out of it, but he's not in it for that at all. He just loves to deliver these things that people are so grateful to receive. Another example, pretty basic. Another fellow that I interviewed, on Friday afternoons from 4 till 7, he delivers piping hot pizzas to people. And it gives him a great sense of satisfaction to deliver something delicious to hungry people who are waiting for him. He gets nice tips out of it, but that's not what he's in it for. It's just something that he loves to do, and it's providing service to others. There are so many of those opportunities out there, and we need to test and keep trying which one kind of resonates for us or which ones resonate for us.
Yeah, I think based on my experience, which is far more limited than yours, of course, that sense of willingness to test and test and test and try and try and try.
Mm-hmm.
We have this sense of, oh, retirement should be easy. It
Easy.
means I do whatever I want when I want.
Yeah.
but what's ever been easy before?
Well,
You know,
exactly. And as I say, people oftentimes people do not break through to phase four because they're too lazy. And phase three is all about trial and error. We don't have time to go into the number of disasters, of failures that I encountered in phase three. We don't. And there are dozens and dozens of others. But you've got to keep trying because if you don't, the likelihood is, or it's certainly a possibility, you just slip back into phase two and you become part of those statistics. I mean, alcoholism, gambling, all of that we haven't even mentioned is rampant for people in phases two and three.
yeah. This is, I think, very helpful sometimes to know there is hope on the other side, and there is no silver bullet to get there other than the fact that it exists. Retirement can be wonderful. Retirement can be a third of your entire life. So let's put the work in those early years, or even maybe even before your retirement, to find that purpose, to find that sense of who you are and what you want to do. Before we start to wrap, Riley, are there any things that we haven't discussed yet that you would like the audience to know about this journey and what's on the other side?
Well, just James, I would say that for me, the value was in the framework of the four phases, recognizing that it was likely going that you were for the most part, except for the entrepreneurs and the others who had these hobbies much earlier on, the vast majority of retirees are going to encounter all of these phases. They'll be for different lengths of time, of course. They'll be at different depths well, they'll be at different depths depending from person to person. But there's a very good likelihood that you will encounter those four phases. And for me, that was just kind of a magic bullet. And the value, I think, of the TED Talk, for example, is that with such a large number of people who have taken the time to watch it, it's very gratifying, first of all, but it also speaks to the level of interest in that topic and understanding of the fact that there are psychological changes and challenges that you are going to encounter, and the framework can be really helpful in recognizing that wherever you are, it's not a dead end. There's opportunity, there's possibilities if you press on.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap. So, Riley, I'm going to link to your website, to your YouTube channel, to that TED Talk that, as we said, has 4.3 million views and counting, your book, your workshop. Where's the best place for people to go if they want to learn more about these four phases and how to apply them?
Well, I would say to our website and to actually purchase the book, The Four Phases of Retirement. As I say, several financial advisors have been kind enough to invite me to present to their clients and to their prospects, and that provides another aspect, kind of the live component, adds something that cannot be in either the TED Talk or in the book. But it all starts at the website, thefourphases.com.
Well, this has been great. And I encourage everyone listening, for as much time as we put into the financial part of our retirement planning, getting the portfolio right, the tax strategy right, the estate, the insurance, that's all going to be meaningless if we don't also have the personal side of the planning done and the purpose side. So, Riley, really appreciate you coming on board to share your experience, your wisdom, to share these four phases. I know it's going to help a whole bunch of people. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, James. Thanks so much.
All right, everyone, take care.
Hey, bye-bye.
Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.